Hi, Ted. Good to see you. How are you today?
Very well, Mark, and looking forward to getting some information out to all of your listeners about the project that we're in the midst of getting going.
Well, this is very exciting, I think, for all of us here at Ted. Mark is Jen as well, who's the one that makes it tick behind all the scenes. But today we're going to talk about morphic fields, the fields, and you're going to give us an introduction to the field, I believe, and then also how that can work with the part of EFT that you're obviously a complete expert in, and that's matrix reimprinting. And then some exciting news about what we're going to do in terms of giving people the opportunity to dig deeper into the field. So before we do all that, though, for anybody who doesn't know who you are, your past life before EFT and matrix reimprinting was very interesting. Perhaps you'd like to give the listeners and the people watching this, maybe on YouTube, a little bit of an introduction to you.
Yeah, just briefly for in my Muggle world, as I call it, in my Muggle job, before I became a tapper, I ran a chain of firstly hotels. I managed hotels, and then I ran a chain of restaurants and bars and nightclubs in central London. And people think, well, it's a real sea change from doing that to being involved in EFT and matrix reimprinting. But really, I've come to realize that I was just in training all that time and honing my skills, people skills, and learning, observing, and really, it is a people business, as very much our business is, as you know, working with small groups of people and quite often with individuals. And this is why now I want to try and use all those skills to bring all of this stuff to a much wider audience, big groups of people. Hence this project that we're doing now to try and get more people to start using EFT, or at least become aware of it and see if it's something that they would find useful in their life. So yeah, it was a very different life back then. But as I say, it's amazing how much I relate back to it, or how much I use from it, not realizing that you're just really on the road you need to be on all the time.
And I can vouch for that from our days training and mentoring EFT and matrix practitioners, that you've got a wealth of knowledge there, and a wealth of stories that are always well worth listening to. So before we go on to what we're going to be doing later on, what are the fields? We talk about the morphic fields, but for anybody who's not sure, what are the fields? What's your definition of them, Ted?
Yeah, that's a big question, and that's what the first one of these 3 hour workshops that we'll tell you about that we're doing will be, is really going quite getting a lot of information and knowledge about the fields and the work that's been done. And I first came across the field, or the fields, when I started doing matrix re-imprinting with Carl Dawson. And Carl talked a lot about the fields and the fields of behavior and habit. And indeed, when I organized the first matrix re-imprinting conference in Brighton quite a few years ago, one of our keynote speakers was Professor Rupert Sheldrake, from who's a biology, was then a biology professor at Cambridge, and who's done a lot of work on what he calls the morphic fields and morphic resonance. And he's not the only scientist who's looked at that, going away back to Max Planck, really the guy who really brought quantum energy and quantum physics to the forefront. And he said many, many years ago, when he won the Nobel Prize, that whilst there were lots of things, many things he didn't know, there was one thing he was sure of, that there is a matrix, he called it a field, or a matrix of information and energy that affects everything from the birth of the stars to our DNA, to our relationships and our futures, and indeed to world peace and everything. And he was trying to describe how this was a huge energy field. And some people just call it the field, but I see it as within the field there are many fields, which we'll talk a bit more about. Lynn McTaggart, another scientist and journalist, has wrote a very good book some years back called The Field, and where she talks about this unified quantum field of energy that's not bound by time or space. And again, Bruce Lipton, whose work Carl Dawson really studied and used and tied up with matrix reimprinting, also talks about this field of energy that's not bound by time or space, and where all this information is. Greg Braden, I think, another very famous person in our line of work, he refers to it as the mind of God. So everybody has sort of a different sort of name for it, but it is about this unified energy field. And for me, it really is, it's a field of information that acts as a blueprint for any form, from crystals to human life to plants, animals, this field of energy that is used as a blueprint for development. I suppose you could say that it really is the record of evolution, and everything that's ever happened, it's there in that field. And as we go through our lives and journeys, we add to that too with our own existence and being and actions. So really, the plan is to look at the work of these people and others and see just how this affects our lives and habits and ways that we are, that we don't understand. How did we do this, or how does a strawberry know to be a strawberry, or how does any life form evolve and grow and be created?
Now, in your field of work, excuse the pun there,
Yeah.
you've integrated this with your work that you do for matrix reimprinting. So, how does that work?
Well, very much so. As I say, when I did Matrix, it's where I first came across this idea of these fields of information and energy. And of course, we all understand energy fields and magnetic fields and electrical fields, and it is pure energy. But in that energy, I see that energy as the carrier of information, coding, if you like I said, the blueprint. And within the field, everything has a field. I believe there's a field of being human, a field of being male, a field of being female, a field of whichever nationality you are, which group or tribe you belong to. And so whenever we started looking at habits, old habits, good habits, bad habits, helpful habits, destructive habits, and patterns of behavior, that's when we started looking at the fields to see what this all contained. And so whenever we look at our own patterns of behavior, or the way our life is, or what affects us, we can use matrix reimprinting and the EFT to really become aware and conscious of our habits and particularly our negative beliefs and the fields of those beliefs, and then using the matrix process to identify and clear any negative using EFT and create. And that's the good thing about matrix, creating a new field, a new positive field, a new habit, a new belief with the reimprinting process. And that's where I think that links the two very powerfully. That's where I see matrix as a really powerful tool to start really being conscious of those fields and creating a new one. And we talk quite a bit now about building a field, creating a field, and with future reimprinting particularly, that I'm very keen that we would use a lot more. And we'll be doing quite a bit in the workshop on the future imprinting process, where we can create a new field. And of course, the more something resonates with an old field, the more similar it is, the stronger it becomes. It's like creating something over and over and over again. You've seen this with people who practice great skills like David Beckham bending a football, or a ballet dancer perfecting a spin, or learning to ride a bicycle. We create a field of doing something, and the more you do it, the stronger you deepen the field, the easier it is to do it. And it always becomes hardwired then. And in fact, we call some of these things instinct. We are instinctively hardwired to do that. and survival things have become part of our also part of our DNA. People say, but it's really goes a lot deeper than that. Our knowing of this information. So that's where we use matrix reimprinting to great effect.
So we're creating these negative fields along the way, aren't we? And we're reinforcing these negative fields, which is why it's always more difficult to maybe undo them when you get to our grand old age, rather than somebody who's I don't know, maybe a teenager who's had less experience and had less ways of building this up. So their equivalent of the ballet dancer practicing and practicing, we keep reinforcing these negative beliefs. So what you're saying is that matrix can undo all that, can get to the big tree that we need to chop down, and then
That's right.
plant something else in its place and build these new fields. That's really exciting stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, well, basically, as you know, we get into a rut. We create something, we make a rut, and this ties in with the neuroplasticity sciences now of the brain, where they're looking at how we actually do create these pathways and ruts in the brain. And once you get into them, you can get embedded in there and do it subconscious, not even be aware of what we're creating. And the old adage, I'm sure you've heard as well, if you don't use it, you lose it. So when you stop using that and going to it, that falls away. So, and that's how things evolve. Sometimes things aren't as helpful or appropriate in life as they were 50 years ago or 100 years ago. For instance, things like people had great skills with working with animals in agriculture, etc. Now people wouldn't know where to start. But we've created new fields of working with computers and technology, which people a couple of generations back, it seemed like witchcraft or magic. And so it's about those fields and how we develop them and reinforce them by imprinting them over and over and over again. And this is where it ties in with matrix reimprinting. And fields are imprinted upon you. It's not just the ones that you create. It's the ancient ancestral ones, familial ones, cultural ones. When you're just showing somebody else's behavior, you take on their beliefs and their patterns, and you keep repeating them over and over again. And some of that's really great because you don't have to keep relearning everything and be conscious of it. It just becomes a natural subconscious way of doing things. And it goes even back to how we learn to walk. We don't have to relearn to walk every time we stand up. We create that field of it, and it's passed on. So, and sometimes we buy into other people's beliefs and behaviors and patterns and think, oh, that's who we are, that's who I am, and we keep repeating them. But we can see that you can build a new field if it's something is not productive or conducive to a happy, creative life, healthy life. Then we can change some of those old fields and build a new field. And we're doing this all the time. And of course, the more the resonance is there, the easier it is for others to do it. Some people will be the pioneers and create a field. For instance, with technology now, I'm sure many people who are parents will observe children now, if they get an iPhone or an iPad or whatever, they almost automatically seem to know to start swiping and how to work this thing without actually being tutored too much. It's because that field that's been created, and they're reading the field of doing that. And we've seen in Rupert Sheldrake's work, he did a lot of sort of research and experimentation into this with animals, where rats would learn to find food in a certain pathway, and a new batch of rats would do it quicker and easier. Someone then said, oh, that's because it's in their DNA, but they're remembering it. It's in their genes. But he took rats from a separate gene pool completely, and they were able to do it faster. So it's when something's created and done. And I'm sure, Mark, you're probably aware, and many people listening will be, that when you get a challenge at the beginning, something you haven't done before, you have to take time and learn it, and it could be frustrating. You're going to get it right. But when you do it right once, then you can do it again and again, and then you can do it very quickly without even thinking, because you built the field of you doing that particular task. So, and that's a very simple field. It's a very small field about one little thing. But can you imagine that everything has its field? From the formation of the human body, to crystals, to plants, everything has a field of development and being.
It's really quite mind blowing, isn't it? Just how many fields there
Yeah.
are. And certainly I can vouch for the animals things. I know that our two dogs, they know when we're turning up sort of, I don't know, a few hundred yards away, and we have a dog walker for days when I'm doing the school run with the grandchildren. And when his car's coming up, or actually just when he's leaving the house because he doesn't live too far away from us, they're at the door. And there's no way they can hear the car or anything. That they know that they've created that field for them.
Yeah, and we're going to look in more depth at stuff like that in the workshops that we're doing, because that's one particular area of what we call almost this telepathy. But they're reading the field of intention, and we'll look at that. But yeah, absolutely, and it is quite mind blowing. There's so much information; it's huge. Can you imagine all the information of every person and every action they've taken, and everything that we've learned and developed and evolved into? It's there in the field. And people are saying, "Oh, yeah, that's memory." But if we don't have the memory bank to keep holding all of that consciously, we would blow a fuse. I think if everything would be overloaded. So it's stored in the field, and we simply read the field when we tune into what it is we need from that at any given time. And we do that most of the time subconsciously, the learned behavior. And it's a vast amount of information, and that's what makes us fast, and we're getting faster and faster at doing things more. We're automatically doing things more because there's more information, and we're developing the brain all the time to read those fields.
Yeah, and it's just like Bruce Lipton says, isn't it? We've got these receivers, and we're tuning into various TV stations, and we have to pick the right channel at the right time to get the job done.
Well, that's it. And we tune into our own local fields, you see, family fields, etc. And it's not, yes, DNA plays a part, absolutely. That's a big factor in it. But Bruce Lipton's work, when he was explaining the field of information, and he said, your cells do not have the capacity for memory. And he likens the body to a big cell. He said, where you really get the information is not from the nucleus of the cell. You can take the nucleus out of a cell and it will live. But it's the receptors on the outside of the cell that are reading an external field of information, passing it into the cell, and the cell is reacting according to what the information is. This is good, this is bad, open or close. Do this function, don't do that function. And as he said, we are like a big, it's like the television broadcast. It's out there. The broadcast is going all the time. And we are like the television sets, the receivers. And we have antenna. The ears, the eyes, the nose, our senses are the antennas that pick up the information and interpolate it. Our skin's a huge antenna that tells us about temperature and whether something could be harmful to the skin or not, poisonous or whatever. And that we have developed over a very long time. So our antenna are reading the field all the time. And as Bruce Lipton says, you've got the television. If the television, the tube goes, what do you say when the television's dead? But yes, did the broadcast stop? So when you get a new television, and what do? You plug it in first. You've got to have a power supply, consciousness, and then you tune it in to the frequency. Boom, the program's running again. And we'll talk a bit more about the fields of self and self-perception, and the biology that Bruce Lipton has clearly shows and teaches how that works. So we'll go into that in more detail in one of the workshops as well, with the field of self and field of other, which is, I think, one of the primal fields of information that we've created. And we are the creators of these fields, with our choices. I read a lovely quote recently. I think I'd heard it years ago, but it just surfaced on one of my feeds from Wayne Dyer, the late lovely Wayne Dyer,
Right.
and he said that our the sum of our lives is just all of the decisions that we've ever made. That's the sum total of our lives. And absolutely, but it's when we read the information, what decisions and actions we take that create and deepen these fields.
Yes, that's fantastic, isn't it? With so many fields to look into, which ones have you decided to do for these series of group workshops that you're going to run?
Well, as I say, the first one we will actually look in more detail about the fields, and prior to that workshop, we'll be sending out information, for reading or listening in YouTube podcasts, etc., from people like Bruce Lipton and Rupert Sheldrake, Lynn McTaggart, and Max Planck, so that people can do a bit of pre-workshop reading and information and come with questions and answers on that, and group discussion and what our perceptions of the fields are. So that will really get us a lot more knowledge about that. And then we will look at specific, because I start to break it down from the very primal fields. What were the first fields that we created as conscious beings? And I think one of them was probably fields of separation, which I will look at, primal separation. And then we start to get awareness and comparison with each other. So the fields of who am I and who is other. And we will look at that. And then one of the big things that we talked about are the ancestral or familial fields. Where do we learn stuff in the fields, or where do we connect to and share the fields and even teach each other? And sometimes people have been indoctrinated into other people's fields and sort of bombarded with it. You have to believe this or else, and if you don't, then you're not one of us. You don't belong. So the tribal fields and the ancestral and familial fields will be one we will look at. And as I said, future imprinting and future fields. Also, we're going to look at one of the first fields I think that really we struggle with still. The one thing that we will all face, and we know that, and anyone who's ever lived has faced it, that field of death, that separation of as we see death, and of grieving and loss, which every one of us in our lives have, known and tried to deal with, and it's very painful and difficult at times. And we'll be bringing in some other people who specialize in these areas, people like Janice Thompson, one of our fellow practitioners, who's written a very good book on grief and how she's used matrix reimprinting with herself and many others in coming to terms and dealing with. So they're going to look at the whole field of that. And again, one of the primal fields, as I said, one of the very early ones. And then we'll be looking at cultural fields. And so we'll be breaking it down into, and the field of surrogate, how we are connected all the time and we are affecting each other and reading each other's energies. And that's not to say that I can come into your field and influence you, but when I'm in your field and we're communicating, you're aware of me, then it's what you make the connection, or what's happening between the interactions, what you make it mean. And let's see where the influences are coming from. So I think, particularly with social media and the way things are going now with AI, that I think that's something that I've decided to add in this time to see where that field is really growing and growing rapidly and how it's affecting us. So there's lots of interesting topics in different fields. And as I say, when we're interacting with each other, we'll look at surrogate fields, we call it, how you influence other things, not directly, and how other things can affect you, not directly, but surrogately.
So the workshops will be interactive then?
Sorry?
The workshops themselves will be interactive?
Absolutely. They'll be sort of 3-hour workshops. And I wanted to make them interactive because I know there's a lot of training and a lot of webinars, etc., online, and they're very effective and there's great information. And I've done some of those myself in the past. But the way I like to do it is that people turn up online. Now, Zoom's great. We can be together without traveling all over the country. And it means that people can feel questions and interact and respond to other people's opinions and debate, maybe even disagree. Let's have a heated debate, as Mrs. Merton used to say. So that's good. That's good for me, that you can challenge different opinions. And I think in some quarters today, people are feeling that they can't. This has almost been frowned upon or shut down. But I think that's healthy. And whatever your opinion is, it counts, it matters to you, and you should be allowed to express it. So that's why I want to make them, interactive. And we will also then, perhaps on topics, say like grief, we will be able for people to tune in and partner up with another practitioner, another attendee of the workshop, and go into one of the breakout Zoom rooms and do a real bit of work using the techniques that we, the EFT and metrics, working on real situations and things for them. So that they really start to, in practice, on real life stuff, real life issues, just like you do at any of the EFT MRA's workshops, which is why I still value them very much. And so, yeah, they will be interactive. There'll be lots of questions, and we will be bringing people in, say like Janice, who we will do interviews with. You and I will chat to them and get questions and answers and ideas, and so people can see some more in-depth experienced people. And I'll also be doing some demonstrations using EFT and matrix reimprinting on real time, so that people can see as a practitioner how you could use this, or as a client, what you could hope you might achieve in your quest to clear some of these negativities in your life.
Great. And I've seen some of the content even, and it really is transformational. So I'm really looking forward to these workshops. And if people want more information about the workshops, that will be in the show notes to this particular podcast. And we'll also be on our website, which is tedmarktraining.co.uk. And before we go, is there anything else you'd want to add to maybe help people make their mind up if they wanted to attend these workshops?
Well, if you look at the information that we're putting out, and you will be a bit more in depth there, about how we're going to cover the topics. But just asking yourself the questions: is there something in your life that is bugging you? It's not positive. It's maybe even derogatory or negative, that you can't seem to get your finger onto or change. Or maybe it's something you say, oh, well, that's just the way I am. It's just the way we are, my family. Or, rather than accepting your fate, as it were, that it's, oh, there's nothing you can do. Ask, what is it I could do? What would I like to be able to do to change that? If I could, what would I change? What would I leave out? And if there's something, some negative belief that you self-talk that you can hear yourself, or you're aware of yourself saying, like, oh, I'm a bit stupid, or I'm not clever enough, or I'm not tall enough, whatever it is, that you're not enoughness, be aware of that and ask yourself, where did that come from? Who or what decided that in my life? When did I come to that conclusion? So ask yourself a very simple question, and then we can look and follow that energy using Carl's matrix reimprinting techniques to see where in the past, or where in this lifetime, that you decided that, when that you had that conscious thought. Particularly, sometimes the negative beliefs are so deep and so subconscious, and we're not even aware of them. But when we tune into the energy of the negativity of that, where we don't feel comfortable, where we feel uneasy, this ease in the body, in life, where we feel less than confident, where we feel less than happy, less than at peace, where we feel threatened, we can tune into the energy and then see where that information field pertaining to you is. What is it that you're tuning into? And some people are quite surprised when they're tuning into something that's not even theirs. It's something of the past, or something of the tribe that they feel they need to chip into. Because, as you know, Mark, if you're going to speak up in the tribe and disagree, it can be very challenging. And I see that more and more now. People, if you dare to challenge something, then you can quite often be jumped upon and labeled and threatened by, for saying their opinion. So I think that will be an interesting podcast when we look at that whole field of speaking up, being true to yourself, and the freedom to do so. Yeah.
Great. It certainly will be interesting, that one. So thanks for your time today, Ted. We look forward
It's a real
to
pleasure.
sharing some more information with everybody, and hopefully seeing you on the workshops.
We will look forward to seeing everybody on there. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Thanks.